Thanks, Hannah, and good morning, everybody. Appreciate you stopping by for today's episode of The Wisdom of the Soul. Our topic today is the Raincloud of Knowable Things. I will always remember the first time I heard this phrase. It just seemed so rich and so wonderful. The Raincloud of Knowable Things. It's a very different view than most of us have been, what shall I say, educated or indoctrinated to believe that we're born with a blank slate and that what we know has to come into our brains through our senses and sensations. We need to be taught. We need to have experience in the world. We need to be trained. We need to learn to improve our memory and to think logically and be analytical and reasonable. But the whole idea of creativity, of intuition, of thoughts, ideas, large concepts, a whole gestalt, arriving full blown, this we're not taught for the most part. I'm sure there are some teachers that are teaching it, and many students are benefiting from it, but it's by and large, and certainly in my educational experience, we were never taught about intuition or how to think creatively or the benefits of non-logical realization. And the Raincloud of Knowable Things suggests that we share a mind. And I'll explain this as we delve into the subject today. We also need to talk a little bit after the opening meditation about the difference between meditation and contemplation, and maybe review just a little bit, because we did at least one class, and I think probably several, on the difference between intuition and instinct. We need to be clear about that. And then we'll just explore the whole process of being more creative, of understanding what you already know. Don't presume that because you know something, you understand it, or if you understand part of it. What makes us believe that we understand all of it? How much of what we know do we understand partially? And how could we know more? Especially when there is a need in our lives to understand more completely something that we thought we knew until we realized we don't really understand it. I often, excuse me, I often think of when we speak along these lines of the Edison quote. No, wait a minute, it wasn't Edison, Einstein. I'm going to get my E names confused. Albert Einstein said, any fool can know things. The secret is to understand them. So we'll talk about understanding. We'll talk about epiphany. We'll talk about realization, self-realization, and this whole experience of the aha, eureka illumination of thoughts arriving full-blown. I'd like to suggest you don't have to wait for that to happen or hope that it happens, that we can facilitate on demand that experience of illumination. It's another nice word for it, illumination. So I'm looking forward to discussing the Raincloud of Knowable Things and helping us all develop our intuition without sacrificing logic. Let's be clear. Intuition is not illogical. It works hand in hand with logic and so-called common sense, which unfortunately is not all that common. Let's begin with an opening meditation. So if you'll get relaxed, settle in to the chair or the furniture you're sitting on, meditation pillow, the floor, the bed. Just get nice and comfortable. Even if you're sitting back in a chair and allowing the back of the chair to support you, or there's a pillow behind you that supports you. I want you to sit as straight as possible, but not rigid. It's important to think of yourself as balanced. Your head above your shoulders relaxed, let your shoulders fall back. That opens the rib cage. You're centered above your hips. And unless you're sitting cross-legged, feet flat on the floor. Make a good contact with the ground, with your feet flat on the floor, or if you are sitting cross-legged, just the back of your legs feeling grounded, as if you're rooted into the earth. Make that connection. If you're a spiritual being, you are an energy being. And energy seeks a ground. All energy looks to the earth. That's where it wants to go. So make that connection. I like imagining how I think it might feel to be a tree, or a flower, or blade of grass for that matter, securely rooted into the earth, plugged in and grounded, feeling as if this is my spot. This is where I grow, with a sense of belonging and being connected to all that is. Every other plant, the animals that run upon the earth, burrow through it, fly above it, and swim through the streams and the lakes and the oceans. All one thing. One sense of wholeness. The material world, the earth. The south pole of the bar magnet. And to connect at the north pole, you can't have one without the other. Think of standing above you, a rain cloud of knowable things. All possibilities of knowledge and understanding that already exist beyond our awareness, beyond our knowledge, beyond our understanding. Raw potential, the undiscovered, the wondrous and wonderful, and stand open and receptive to a downward precipitation from this rain cloud of knowable things, as if all that could be known is available, but it gently and lightly precipitates down, as if into the top of your head, connecting you to the sky as your body connects you to the earth. And so you're like a battery or a bar magnet with two polarities, sky and earth, spirit and matter. You are the soul. In form as what appears to be an individual, apparently separate, sometimes feeling even alienated. isolated, sometimes even abandoned or betrayed, as if life and its circumstances is something we struggle against, as if divinity is a king and we are mere subjects or commoners. Consider instead that we are the soul between spirit and matter. We are consciousness itself, imbued with a consciousness that not only allows us to think, but offers us the opportunity to be ever more aware of what we think, ever more aware of how we feel in its relationship to what we think, and more aware of the choices we have in the way we speak and behave, conscious enough to initiate it, having considered the consequences, rather than simply reacting reflexively, often because we feel like it, without any thought or consideration. Aware of our perception of the world around us, of its beauty, of its integrity, and of its wholeness. And although every individual, every incarnated life form has its own unique experience of living, the experience is of the one life. One life, one consciousness, perceived from infinite points of view. We are not subjects of a divine king. We are extensions, fragments or elements of one mind. You are that one mind, that one heart, that one life, from a unique point of view. Stand open and receptive, even now, as you become more relaxed, as you feel safer, as you open yourself, expanding your awareness, considering what may not have been considered before. Seeking to understand more than you know, seeking to understand more than you already understand about what you know, but not by reasoning, not by analyzing, not by judging, but simply by contemplating, as if you hold an idea gently in the palm of your hand, as if it were fragile, and you simply consider it in a non-judgmental, rather passive way. Understand that your brain is not your mind. that it's in our interest to create a soul, mind, brain alignment. A path of least resistance. From the Raincloud of Knowable things, through your personal sense of mentality, of awareness, the mind, and then into the organ that is the brain. Which limits awareness. The brain constrains awareness. It creates focus and attention. Consider vision. There is central direct vision, like a spotlight, but there is also peripheral vision. Perhaps if our central vision, the focused spotlight that allows us to apply our attention, if that were greater, embracing peripheral vision to 180 degrees or more, that would be too much information, too much awareness. And so, as a result of natural selection and evolution, the human being has unconsciously recognized the benefits of a more narrow focus without losing track of the periphery. This is selective awareness. To be aware that awareness is selective is to improve your control and expand your awareness. Just as you could listen to a piece of music focusing on the lyrics, you hear all of the other instruments, but you're focused on the lyrics. On another occasion, you could listen to the same recording of music, the same song, and put your attention only on one instrument, the drums or the guitar or the horns or the strings or whatever. And you'd still hear the lyrics and all of the other instruments, but they would fall into the background. You have that ability, just like the eye, direct, focused, central vision, as contrasted to the periphery. We have that same ability with the mind. The brain provides that ability by acting as a filter to allow us to select our attention, to focus it, and then to pull back, to zoom out, and to embrace the entirety of it at will. You could go into a room in like a convention or some business mixer where there are 100, 150 people in small groups of 2, 3, and 4, buzz, 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 all this conversation, all this noise, and standing in one place, using your eyes to help you focus. You could allow your ears to tune into a single conversation, not to the exclusion of all the other chattering. But by listening, by focusing like the center of that direct vision, this selective awareness, you could hear this one conversation. And simply by moving your eyes across the room and finding another group of people to listen in on, you could hear that conversation. And the others would fall into the background. We have both. That's what the brain does. The brain filters awareness. So if we seek to access the Raincloud of Knowable things, to open our minds to understand more completely what we think we know and believe we may understand, we have to be aware of the process. Standing open and receptive to this alignment of the mind standing above the brain and the soul, our connection to the one life, the all that is, grounded in the totality of being above that. In the philosophical writings about the Raincloud of Knowable things, there are two aspects. There is climbing the mountain, because it's more likely to rain up high in the mountains. But there's also the descending of the cloud. So we have to prepare ourselves. The creative process we'll talk about more in today's class. Imagine preparing yourself, forming the intention to use contemplation and meditation to study with your eyes closed, not with judgment or analysis, but standing open in wonder. You have to wonder if life is to be wonderful. That's climbing the mountain. And as you do so, the rain cloud descends and precipitates down. It's a meeting of the lower mind and the higher aspects of self. So I'd like you to try that now. Better said, I'd like you to do that for just a couple of minutes. And I give you an esoteric problem, kind of a koan. Consider that a jar is never really empty, for if it contains nothing, at least it confines space. So there is a space inside the jar, and there is space outside the jar. And even if the jar is empty, we could say, well, it's full of space, if nothing else. And we can easily consider that the space inside the jar is somehow separate from the space outside the jar, until the jar is broken and the space returns to its source, which was never diminished in the first place. The space inside the jar didn't go anywhere. It didn't change. I'd like you to consider for just a couple of minutes, in an open and receptive contemplation, without judging, without reasoning, without logic, just passively allow these ideas to germinate in your mind, that you might have a better understanding of this apparent contradiction, the space inside the jar, was it ever separate from the space outside the jar? And what are the implications? How is this an allegory for what appears to be separation in life, despite the fact that we also are aware of the harmony and the unity of the universe? One thing spinning around, universe. While I remain quiet for just a couple of minutes, consider the inside space, the way the jar separates and contains that space, and how it rejoins what it always was when the jar breaks. Perhaps there never was a difference, a distinction at all between the space inside the jar and the space outside the jar. Perhaps it's all an illusion. And then again, maybe both things are true. That space cannot be divided up. It cannot be sectioned off or contained. And then again, it can. It reminds me of the riddle about the single candle flame that could light 100 other candles, 1,000, 1,000,000 other candles, never be diminished, much less exhausted. Now, if you find yourself confused and say, I don't know what to do with this, I don't know how to do this, that's fine, that's good. Be playful, that's the secret. Be playful. Do not make this kind of work an effort or a struggle. Leave all sense of desperation, any need or demand for it to happen now. Leave that behind. And even if you come up with nothing, no insight, no realization, consider that you've planted some seeds. And the next time you reflect on such things, you'll notice there's more there to consider than there was the last time. And you recognize the process. You be patient, like a gardener. Patient, recognizing what you can do to cultivate the garden and how much of it is beyond your control. Make it fun. Be playful. Approach the universe as if you were a child with a beginner's mind, with a sense of adventure and enthusiasm, some oh boy, golly, gee whiz, how cool, awesome dude, with a little giggle. Be playful. Aspire to walk this earth as a child, so free, so carefree, seeing wonder and astonishment wherever you turn. That's the approach of the mystic, who knows that there's only one thing at work, only one of us here, and yet explores the multiplicity, the myriad of forms, possibilities, and potentials with joy, peace and happiness, gratitude and reverence that we get to be here. Let's come back slowly to the waking state. Number one, simply form the intention to conclude this meditation or contemplation. Two, feel a gentle rising up as you might in the morning without benefit of any alarm clock, just waking naturally and laying there for a moment. As your consciousness expands, you become aware of your physical surroundings. And three, eyes open now, wide awake, back in the room, feeling fine, rested, refreshed, energized, revitalized, feeling better than before. Better and better, better than before. I missed my mouth. All right. Let's talk a little about the difference between meditation and contemplation. And I'm going to do a little screen share here. I don't do this very often, so let me see if I can figure it out. Shouldn't be too hard. This is from, well, it says down at the bottom here someplace, mindfulnessbox.com. So one of many, many websites on mindfulness, but I liked the little graphic. I thought it was sort of cool. And let's go down these two columns. I'm not sure if this is going to help or not, but because meditation and contemplation are not completely exclusive concepts. This is a pretty good attempt. It says at the top, contemplation versus meditation, but they really overlap. Both are a closed eye process, right? Let's see what they have that's similar, and in what ways are they unique. So the first bullet point on the meditation side, meditation is about letting go of thoughts And on the contemplation side, contemplation is about lingering on thoughts to understand them more deeply. Now, when we talk in meditation about letting go of your thoughts, that doesn't mean, as many believe, that your mind will be devoid of thoughts or completely quiet. There are states where it is possible to be unaware of thoughts, of the thinking process. But it is not a suppression of thinking. It is just turning attention away from the brain and its tendency to think perpetually. That's what it does. It just is always generating thoughts. And there are many kinds of meditation. The meditation that we have focused on in this series, Wisdom of the Soul, has been Vipassana as really one of the most basic types of meditation. And that's where we begin by watching the breath and identifying as the watcher rather than the breather. If you've been with us for a while, you've had an opportunity to practice this. And if you're a meditator and you've been to other classes and seminars and studied yoga or Eastern philosophy, actually meditation is part of all forms of philosophy. You may be familiar with this idea, but not know why you're watching your breath. Maybe nobody ever told you why you would watch your breath and identify as the one who sits in the moment without considering the past or the future and without judgment just watches those thoughts. Watch that breathing, because there's no such thing as a good breath or a bad breath or a better breath you just observe it and create this. I don't want to say I don't want to say detachment, because then you'd be oblivious, but a non-attachment to the breathing. So you allow the body to breathe itself, and you're standing over here in the side watching it. Well, the purpose of this is so that we can then, in meditation and mindfully in our eyes open living, walking around in the world, create a non-attachment with our thoughts and our feelings and our behavior and our interaction with other people. Instead of thinking we're thinking, we can be aware of the distinction between an applied, purposeful, task-related thought and the task unrelated, intrusive, often negative nonsense that just bubbles up when you're not busy applying your thinking. And you realize you are the awareness of the thought, not the thinker. And all this time you thought you were the thinker. Or you thought you were a victim of your emotions. Well, I'm angry, they upset me, what am I going to do? Well, you could stand back, observe the emotion without being a victim of it. Catch it on the horizon while it's still a little guy. Anger, a great example. What if you saw anger coming a mile away and were conscious enough or aware enough to say, this is starting to upset me. I don't understand this better if I don't do something to open myself to more insight, realization, and understanding about why I'm feeling upset or angry. This thing's going to grow. It's going to get bigger. It's going to get all over me, create a mess, and I'm going to end up saying and doing things that I regret. I have that pattern. We all do. Just we call it losing it. So you can get it back before you lose it. And so too our behavior, our speech. We can consider what we're going to say before we blurt it out. Save ourselves a lot of embarrassment. I was taking pictures. This was 30 years ago, 30, 35 years ago. I was taking some pictures at a pool party, and this one older woman was very self-conscious. She didn't want her picture taken. And I said, look, there was no social media, no internet in those days. And I said, look, I'm not going to put these in the paper, and I'm not going to show them to anybody but you, and you don't have to be so self-conscious about it. But I spoke without thinking. And instead of saying self-conscious, my stupid brain said vain. And I told her, you don't have to be so vain. Oh my God. It was like the world stopped. She turned on a heel and walked away, didn't say anything. And with the help of my friends, I realized what a moron I was and had used completely the wrong word, because I just blurted out the wrong word. I just got stupid for a minute. And so I hurried inside and I said to the woman, look, I'm sorry. God, my God, I don't think you're vain. It wasn't vanity that I was talking about. I just didn't want you to be self-conscious or worry about your appearance. And I'm not going to do anything with these photos that wouldn't check with you first and get your permission. But oh, and you and I, everybody else has a ton of these, don't we? Times when we just didn't think. So when we talk about letting go of thoughts, it doesn't mean that there are no thoughts to consider. It's just that we're the awareness of the thought, not the thinker. And then contemplation. I think I hear a microphone open. Be sure you guys, your mics are closed. And then contemplation is lingering on the thought. Turning it over in your mind, I think, is a nice phrase. Second bullet point, mindfulness meditation is a secular practice, although some forms of meditation are religious. And then the corresponding bullet point and the contemplation side. Contemplation sometimes involves reflection on a religious text, but it could be anything. Like that little enigma about the space inside the jar and the space outside the jar. Third bullet point, the goal of meditation is to cultivate a non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. That's awareness without judgment, just pure awareness, no labeling, no application of values. While the goal of contemplation is to explore a topic or a feeling in greater depth. You just don't do it logically. You just don't use, well, if this is true and this is true, then this is. It's not like solving an algebra problem. It's much more passive, open and receptive. It involves the intuition as opposed to the logic. Understand how those two go hand in hand. They're both forms of thinking. You could say intuition is more of a feeling than a thought, but it really is a mental process. So logic and intuition are complementary in that logic is deductive, general to specific. It's taking things apart. That's what logic is, deductive logic. Whereas intuition is just the opposite, or better said, the complement. That's specific to general. You have all these observable details, and you want to intuit an overarching generalization. What do all these little bits and pieces have in common? That's not logic. That's passive intuition, waiting for the illumination to occur. And then the last bullet point, common meditation methods are awareness and concentration meditation. Common contemplation methods include journaling, reflecting, prayer and sitting in silence. I don't think that's the be all and end all of it, but I think that's pretty good. I like that, and offer that to you for your dining and dancing pleasure. In about 10 or 15 minutes, I'd like to do some Q&A, so I hope you will consider asking a question or making a comment and participating in that way. It benefits everyone. I'd like to talk about, again, accessing this Raincloud of Knowable things. This whole idea, again, that we really need to challenge this idea that the totality of the universe, which we think of as God and tend to anthropomorphize or personify as an old guy with a long beard and maybe on a throne or riding a white horse. This is a feudal model of monarchy. God is the king, and we are the subjects, the commoners, or the unwashed, dirty, bad sinners. This is a feudal hierarchy. It's a monarchy. And it puts the church in charge. It puts the church in the middle. Or the temple or the mosque or whatever the religious organization is. The mystical view, I'm not telling you the one right way to think or believe or whatever. It's just, again, offered for your contemplation and your consideration. What makes a mystic a mystic? What is mysticism? What is a mystical view? What is a mystery school? It's based on a much more democratic idea of the way the universe works and the relationship of the one to the many, or of the parts to the whole. And it's not feudal. It's not a monarchy. It's not a power down hierarchy. You could argue that it's a hierarchy, but it's very different. It's a hierarchy of the totality and its parts. So all the mystical literature in every religion has its mystical, how shall I say, wings, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism. I don't know if you can call Buddhism mystical, but it has a lot of appeals to mystics. And in the same way, Taoism. For example, the Christian mystics are generally the Rosicrucians. There's many Christian mystics, Catholic mystics, Protestant mystics. In Judaism, the Hasidics, interestingly, are mystics, though they're very conservative. The Kabbalah and the Zohar are mystical Jewish traditions. In Islam, the Sufis are mystics. In fact, Sufi is not only a word for the mystical branch of Islam, it's also a word that's used in a very generic and general way for anyone who believes in the universality of love and the connection of everything to everything, all of the parts in the whole, and the whole and all of the parts. A shaman, shamans, the plural of shaman is shamans. They're mystics, they're Sufis. And Hinduism, again, it runs the gamut from the very conservative to the mystical. And Jainism and Sikhism and a lot of variations on the theme. And then, of course, in the agnostic, outside of all religion, many mystical philosophies like Neoplatonism. the works of Plotinus or Plotinus. Very mystical, very wonderful. Uh, you might think it's based on the work of Plato if it's called Neoplatonism, but it's Neoplatonism. It's distinct. It has its roots, perhaps, in Platonic philosophy, but it actually spills over into Sufism again. Um, Sufism has a lot of Neoplatonism in it. If you want to Google this stuff and do some of your own research, I really encourage you to do that. So I'm arguing that the universe is very democratic. It's made up of equal pieces, that all human beings are endowed with certain inalienable rights, God-given rights that you cannot be separated from. That's what inalienable or unalienable means, that you cannot be separated from your divinity. I think that's a really good definition of mysticism. So think of the rain cloud as either the plane of the souls or the mind of God itself, which is the totality of all that is. How could anything exist that is not of God? It's pretty hard to begin to argue, whether you're religious or spiritual but not religious, that only some things are godly and then other things exist that are not God. Try working on that for a while, see where that leads you. So how do we aspire to expand our awareness, to extend into this, or stand beneath, receptive and open to the downward precipitation of this rain cloud of knowable things? How do we understand what we know but don't understand? Or how do we expand our understanding of the knowledge we have to know what we don't yet know, to understand what we don't yet understand? Intuition, contemplation, and meditation, but particularly contemplation, where you don't create a level of non-attachment of your thought. You are engaged with the thought, but you do it in a very passive, very gentle way, without logic. Again, I like the phrase turning it over in your mind. Or if you're if you like visualizing when you meditate or contemplate, to imagine yourself walking around a problem, or looking at it from the top down, or getting underneath it and looking up, or moving into it, doing whatever you can to change your perspective, to take it apart. If it had a schematic, could you blow it up and look at it? And there is I'm forgetting his first name now, but there's a fellow named Wallace, a 19th or 20th century. He was actually born in the 19th century, died in the early 20th century. Forget his first name, but Wallace has a very nice model of creativity. It's not the only one, but it's one that I like a lot. And I thought I'd offer it to you here. It's just 4 points, and you might want to jot these down if you got a pencil or a pen. The 4 stages or steps of creativity begin with, as you might imagine, preparation. You got to organize your thoughts. You got to make a decision. What is it that I don't know and would like to know? Or what is it that I know but don't really understand very well? And what is it that I would like to understand even more? How does this extend to that? And how do I bring these disparate pieces together into something larger so I can get a more comprehensive overview of my life and how to live it in a more rewarding kind of a way? How do I find the joy and the happiness and the peace and even the ecstasy or the bliss that I hear promised by many teachers, speakers? So the first step is preparation. Just organize your thoughts. What is it you want to contemplate? Review what you do know about it and take a look at what you don't know about it. Okay. The second step is the contemplation itself, the closed eye contemplative process. Wallace actually called this incubation, which is a nice word for it, but I'm going to call point to contemplation. And we just did it. It's a meditation where instead of stepping back and watching your body breathe so as to learn in time, to watch your thoughts, study the way the mind works, recognize your patterns, find your traumas and emotional damage and explore that, resolve the upset and the hurt in your life, better understand yourself so that you might better understand other people. The third step is the illumination. And one of the marks of intuition, of the aha experience, the eureka illumination, is that it comes like light. So the third step is the illumination, the the lid lifting aha experience. Oh my God. And they arrive full blown often. Sometimes it's just a big piece that drops in. Sometimes it's the whole enchilada that drops in. The reason I like light and so many others refer to intuition, the process of realization as an illumination, is that it may be like the dawning of an idea where, you fade up from black into a gradual realization. And it's a wonderful feeling. Wait a minute, it's coming. I'm getting it. Hold on, don't say anything. It feels a little like remembering, right? Understanding often feels like remembering. It's a very unusual feeling because it couldn't be remembering. You've never known this before, but it feels like recalling. So that's sort of an understanding that it wasn't known by you, the separated individual, the mortal being, but it is known by your soul, which shares the ground of the one life. That's why insight and illumination often feels like recall. And so sometimes it's a dawning of an idea, sometimes like that archetype of the light bulb over your head. It just pops on, just boing. Oh my God, that's it. And it arrives with a confirmation, a sense of, oh, that's so obvious. Why didn't I think of that before? Wow, what a great realization. And sometimes you're thunderstruck. Sometimes it's just a lid-lifting explosion of awareness. And it's like, not only do you understand, but your whole life has changed. The landscape is forevermore changed. Everything about life is different. This often happens after surviving some traumatic event. After my heart bypass surgery, like 12 years ago now, I think, I woke up out of that surgery with a whole new take on life that really surprised me, because I really trusted that I was going to come through it no problem. That wasn't it. I was really surprised by the change that I experienced. A shift in priorities, mostly. That's what occurred to me first. That things that had seemed important to me became so trivial, so ridiculous. Like, life itself became so much more meaningful. Um, my ability to watch the sunrise or sunset. We lived in upcountry Maui at the time, and we had this view of both the North Shore and the South Shore from 4,000 feet. And there was this meadow out in front of our house. And in the late afternoon, because there's ocean all around you, and because we're 4,000 feet above it, when the sun goes down, it goes down. It goes way down. It goes way past the horizontal. And so there's like an hour or an hour and a half of what a photographer would call golden time, the golden hour. Out out there is like 2.5 or 3 hours, where the meadow, I often said, would be filled with butterscotch. And the birds would gather. The birds noticed it too. The birds loved it. And they would all gather in the trees. There was one tree in particular, it'd be filled with birds in the late afternoon as the sun would go down, and they would chatter up such a song. And watching the shadows lengthen and this meadow become, a more golden color of yellow, and then more orange and more golden, and then the violets would just, it was so different than, it was like I just hadn't noticed it. I was awakened. I woke up. Meditation and contemplation will allow you to continue that process, to initiate and then continue that process of awakening. And so the fourth step is verification. So it's preparation, contemplation, sometimes called incubation, the illumination, and then you open your eyes, and number 4 is verification. Now you verify. You go out into the world and apply what you've learned, or you see how it knits together with other concepts that you know and are aware of, and you begin to weave this tapestry of a personal philosophy. You're no longer dependent upon what other people say. You see differences of opinion as a grand and beautiful diversity from which you get to pick and choose that which resonates for you and makes sense to you, and you learn to honor that and respect, if not agree with, others who have a different point of view. You respect that if their intention is in the right place, if they're not angry and nasty and hostile and tell you you don't have the Lord in your life and they do, and they're saved and you're not, and you're going to hell and they're going to pray for you, and all that, all that arrogant, self-righteous stuff. Then you go to compassion for their suffering. And that's another challenge. That's a real challenge. That's another class for another day. We'll definitely have to do more on the nature of compassion, how we use that to resolve our frustration and hurt and our anger at those who are judging us. It's one thing not to judge others, but how much control do you have over feeling judged? It's another issue altogether. So you got those 4 steps, the Wallace 4 steps of creativity: preparation, contemplation, illumination, and verification, right? But you don't have to limit yourself to books. You're not limited to Google. You're not limited to the ideas that are extant on the earth. You can go beyond all of that and assemble your own philosophy. You have not only that right, but that responsibility, because you are not other people. You're not supposed to have the views of other people, at least not in all regards, certainly in some regards. There's a lot we can agree on in this world. Sensible people can agree on a great deal. But the whole point of being an individual is to have your own personal view of reality. Again, it's not just a freedom, it's a responsibility to add to the mix. And you say, well, I'm not, nobody's going to read my journal or my dream book. I'm not going to write a book. I'm not giving lectures. I'm not going to set up a church or do a webinar or seminars. What difference does it make? It makes a difference in that just the way you be in the world, your consciousness is part of the whole. So the more peaceful and loving and kind and empathetic and compassionate you are, that goes out into the world. Energy follows thought. It's a core understanding of the magnetic nature of consciousness, of love, that you reap what you sow. If you just put out in the way you drive, in the way you treat people, the clerk at the grocery store, the waiter or waitress in the restaurant, that one member of your family that you really don't like, but you got to spend Thanksgiving with them anyway. Instead of needing them to change yourself and find new ways of at least tolerating who they are, but then go beyond that. See, what can I learn from them? What can they teach me about me? So much of the wisdom is about making events and circumstances in life personal, understanding what a situation says about you, rather than fixating or obsessing on what it says about them. That's what the animal brain wants to do. And often people get together in conversation and small talk, and that's all they talk about is other people and what they did and who they are, and what kind of people they are, and why they're bad and wrong and stupid, and politics are horrible, and thank God I'm not them, and all of that stuff. Turn it around, make it about yourself. Not as a matter of blaming yourself, but as a matter of enlightening yourself. So the Raincloud of Knowable Things, that all things knowable are available to you right now. Not on Google, not in the books, the libraries. There's a lot of wonderful information in the world, but there's a lot of information upstairs that you can bring down. The alchemical model, I'll just add, and then we'll go to the Q&A, is evaporation, condensation, precipitation. Right? That's a cycle. It's a cycle. As above, so below. So we're connected. You have to rise up. You have to aspire to it. Then it comes down to you, and you meet it at the mountaintop. That's where you find the rain cloud. Okay, Hannah, do we have any comments or questions that we can go to?
Yeah, well, we didn't until a second ago, but then, oh, I guess, well, Hanif chatted just a link to something. Gray Walls, the creative process. So I can take that and put it in the.
Maybe he Googled Wallace's.
Did you want to say anything?
Hanif, can you come on? Can you unmute?
Okay, now I'm unmuted. What I did was Googled Graham Wallace and posted a link to his creative process, which is some graphics and other stuff to it that may be useful for people who are interested in it.
So it's Graham. That was the name I was going for.
And
Graham.
it's spelled two different ways in Google. Wallace, the traditional way with a CE, and it's also spelled WALLAS. So that's what we have.
Really?
Yeah.
So much for trusting Google or the internet, huh? Well, so what's the link again for the podcast people?
I put the link in the chat, but the link that you sent me, it got a little bit of typos in it. So maybe you want to send it again.
I'll do that again, Anna.
I think you're able to chat to everyone in the meeting if you want as well.
Okay, I'll try that.
And
Good.
then Hanif also added another comment, and I have a couple comments, so we can go in whatever order you want. And what Hanif said was, can ego allow kindness, compassion, etc., if there is absence of evil in general?
If there is an absence of evil in general. Hanif, can you explain that?
Yes. The ego kind of plays, in some cases, becomes a wall or a barrier to having compassion or kindness. And is that because of, I guess the question would be better articulated if there was the absence of evilness, would the ego be less prone and allow more kindness and compassion?
Oh, I see. Yes. Yes. Can the ego be placated to step into the background?
I guess, yeah, that's a more articulate way to put it, sir.
Trying. I'm trying to get a feel for what you're saying, and I think that yes, it can be somewhat put into abeyance by developing the higher consciousness. It appears, and my teachers have said as much as well, that we will never escape the ego as long as we're in form, incarnate, wearing meat bodies. There will be an ego. There will be some aspect of mentality that is in charge of survival and sees you as separate, disconnected, and at odds with the world. And if you're ever in real danger, it will come rushing to the fore. But to recognize that stress does not have to be a lifestyle, the appearance of danger is largely an illusion, that we're safer now, human beings, than we ever have been. Hard to believe if you watch the news, but it's true. There's a lot of evidence that we're safer and safer all the time. So as we learn to distinguish between uncertainty and confusion and ignorance and lack of awareness, separate all of that from real danger, then we can learn to manage that ego and keep him over in the passenger seat riding shotgun. But like any teenager, the ego would rather drive. It wants to get behind the wheel and take charge. And if you let your guard down, it will. It'll dress up like the soul. You see it in gurus all the time. They think they've got it wired. They're all gurued up. They're all holy. They do their meditation. And then, they're messing around with the female students after work. It's repeated again and again. So it's tricky. It is the jokester. It again, it's as we said in last week's class on the shadow side, it's the essence of what we have labeled evil. It's just the ego. It wants what it wants, and it wants it now, and it doesn't give a damn about our impact on other people. It's very selfish and self-centered because its job is to survive. And you do all this spiritual work, dissolving the ego, releasing the sense of individuality and separation, unifying yourself, and it's always going to be threatened. So there is that struggle. But it doesn't have power that we don't give it. We can manage it. You just have to keep doing it. It's not a place where you suddenly get it. It's something that rises up again and again and again, like a rogue wave on the ocean. Everything's fine. 3-foot wave, 3-foot wave, 3-foot wave. All of a sudden, here's a 60-foot wave. Where the hell did that come from? Yeah. Good. Thank you. Rhonda, you said you had a comment or a question.
Sure, why not? There was two things that I started thinking about. And of course, I apologize if it's laborious to people. I make so many connections with AA and Bill W. when I come to this class. And one of the things that gets talked about is steps 10 and 11. And step 10 is self-reflection, and 11 is prayer and meditation. And it talks in some of the literature about the linkage between self-reflection, meditation, and prayer, and it calls it an unshakable foundation for life. Because what we do is in the 10th step, it's a daily kind of inventory, and we kind of look often at the darker side of ourselves or the mistakes that we've made, and then we bring that into our meditation and contemplate it, I think, as you were saying. And in the prayer, some people say prayer is talking to God, meditation is listening to God, but the prayer is where it kind of gets verbalized, these things that we want to work on. And so it's like prayer and meditation is the pathway or the arena for looking at our self-reflection. And each of these things has value on its own, but when they're combined, like I said, they call it an unshakable foundation for life. And so I just thought that connection was interesting.
Yeah, I think these kinds of things just confirm that Bill W. and his friends who worked with him on developing this program were well aware of the mystical material that's available, and the very fact that the program works, and may be the only program that works as well as it does, is evidence that it's full of these insights and this truth. And so
Yeah,
it's not surprising, it's encouraging.
It's insights about just being human too. Like all the things that we go through, those are human. It's my how I want my solution to these problems is the difference in being an alcoholic. But the things that occur are just human experiences. And so to find a better alternative, such as meditation, contemplative meditation, and a healthier way to approach life is a good thing. And the other thing I wanted to comment on, I think it's interesting how you were talking about God is, I don't know if you put it just like this, but like God is everything or God is nothing, or if God can't just be in some things, it's either it's in everything or, and that kind of reminded me of that idea of God is everything or God is nothing. And taking that to sort of the ego level, it's like, well, certain things, I'm willing to turn over to the universe and let go of, but then there's other things I'm like, no, but I can't give that up. I got to hold on to that part because, that's too big of a chore to just let go of, and what I'm learning more and more is that we really can release all of it, and it just has so much to do with trust. So anyways, that's my comment on that stuff.
I think that's rich. I don't mean that in a sarcastic way. Wonderful. The whole issue of control, of wanting or fearing that we must be in control, and that having faith that the universe is supporting you, that you are not separate from anything, that as long as you are loving, as long as you have love in your heart, which is aware of being awareness, then all things work together for good, despite appearances. That, to be a little corny, every cloud has a silver lining. Every curse is a blessing in disguise. And you can count on that, even if you don't always see it. It may be years later that you realize that this tragedy actually benefited you in some way, that it wasn't what was done to you that mattered, it was how you responded that mattered. And then you see the role of adversity, of pain, of suffering, and of discontent in the enlightening process. And you see how divinity uses what the simple-minded would call evil. You know, why would the ultimate goodness, God is good, devil is evil? It's pretty clear, right? So good and evil, we talked last week about Zoroastrianism, which is essentially the two gods, good and evil, or God and the devil, God and the devil. But God uses shadow, uses adversity and our problems. This goes back to the Hermetic alchemy of the fires of the Athanor burning off the dross or the impurities so that only the gold remains in the end. That's a process called purgation in Hermetic philosophy and ancient Egyptian mysticism. Purgation, that it's the fires of our pain and our suffering and our problems that give us the opportunity anyway to learn and be better. It's not a guarantee. Some people seem intent to just not learn, and I think a lot of that is I want to be in control. I don't want to give up control. And a nice affirmation that I will offer you guys, even when it comes to being better at meditation and letting go of physical tension as you relax, alter brainwave states and expand your awareness, is to say to yourself or remind yourself, I am in control of the letting go. Seems a little paradoxical, but if you start with just physical tension, I am in control of the letting go of physical tension in my body, and I let go, and not only do I survive, I feel better. Oh, what a relief. Boy, that's really nice. I can relax. It's like going outside and laying in the sun, and you feel the warmth of the sun. If it's not too hot, right? You feel the warmth of the sun on your face and your arms and your body, and it just seems to sort of caress you into this gradual letting go, this feeling of relaxation. But then that becomes a parallel for letting go of a lot of false beliefs and a lot of negative patterns and a lot of false assumptions about your emotions, that you're not good enough or smart enough or lovable enough. And Hannah, when you talk about being human, I think that's such a wonderful thing to remind ourselves. As part of remaining humble is how absurd it would be to seek spiritual unfoldment and then get arrogant about it. It's exactly the wrong way to go. You know you're progressing spiritually when you become more and more humble, more and more forgiving, and kinder and more loving, and able to let go of the stuff that we carry around, the grudges and the animosity, and just doesn't matter. In the end, sometimes I look at the political leaders who upset me so much 40 years ago, 50 years ago, Nixon and Watergate, the war in Vietnam. I was so angry about that, right? And the continuing injustice in the world and watching the rich and powerful struggle to maintain their wealth and their power and then expand their wealth and their power. And now they're all dead. And they're footnotes in the history books. And people, young people coming up today don't even know who they are. Stop a 20-year-old on the street and ask him what is Watergate. They don't know.
Michael, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second because I have to go. I have made Melinda a co-host. She has offered to field the last of the questions and comments. And before I turn it all the way over, Iris chatted and said, hi, anytime would you like me to speak something about reincarnation today? Iris.
Um, Perhaps if it bears on the class, not that we have to stick with the theme of the class, but